Welcome to ESGX Live, the community for information and education that inspires collaboration and action to help build a better and more inclusive society. This week we're exploring what we can each do to help address the ever-growing refugee crisis. Imagine not having a home, perhaps not even having a home country. If you were lucky, you would have been able to gather up what you could carry of your possessions before you left and then travel, sometimes on foot, often in great danger, into the unknown to try to find a safe place for you and maybe your family to live. Around the world, there are about 70 million displaced people. That's roughly 1% of the world's entire population. If they were a country, they would be the world's 20th largest nation, larger than France or the UK or Thailand. Just over 40 million of these refugees are internally displaced in their home countries. The other 30 million are international refugees and asylum seekers. Some are old, some are young. They are men and women, boys and girls, and they are all people with stories to tell and talents to share. People with capacity to create art and music and new scientific inventions and new businesses. People who can create opportunities for others as well as themselves, who can care for others and inspire others too, and yet through no fault of their own, they lack access to the most fundamental resources that most of us take for granted. They come primarily from Latin America, Africa, the Middle East and Asia, and you won't be surprised by the names near the top of this list. But they also come from Nigeria and Rwanda and Colombia, Pakistan and India, amongst others. Most are hosted in neighbouring countries, placing a huge burden on those host nations, and the COVID-19 crisis has added a whole new burden. And the numbers continue to grow year by year. Barely 1 in 20 internally displaced people were able to return home in 2018, and barely 1 in 50 international refugees were able to do so. All around the world, there are particular challenges for children and women. So the refugee crisis is often seen as a problem, a huge problem, with no obvious solutions at all. But what if, from a different perspective, we could see it as a tiny problem and a huge opportunity? After all, we're finding a better way of looking after just 1% of the world's population. And we're talking about finding a way to liberate the imagination and energy and talent of 70 million people. Unsurprisingly, refugees are usually resilient, determined, hardworking and creative, so it's no surprise that there are refugees who have been hugely successful in the arts, science, business, politics and finance. So what should the stronger economies do to help? How can companies and investors make more of this talent whilst helping the communities in need? How can we as individuals act to make a real difference? What are the barriers and how can they be overcome?
I left Iran as a refugee when I was 10 years old with my mom, my dad and my little brother. Of course, there were some problems. My parents had a really rough time finding a job, but once they managed to find a job, I think that a lot of things just started going much better for us.
As we count down to the hour, please take a moment to introduce yourself to your fellow guests via the chat function at the bottom of the screen. And as always, we'd like to make this as interactive as possible, so please do ask questions using the Q&A function too. We very much look forward to the discussion.